You know that moment when someone's cruelty is so precise, so calculated, that time itself seems to freeze? When words don't just hurt, they brand themselves into your soul like hot iron? I'm talking about the kind of humiliation that makes your hands shake, your vision blur, your entire existence shrink down to a single burning thought. How dare they? That's where my story begins. Thanksgiving dinner, 2019, the Hamptons. A mansion so massive it had a name, Harrington Estate, like it was a living, breathing member of the family, which in a way it was. Old money. The kind of wealth that whispers rather than shouts, that judges you for having to work, that treats new anything with the same disdain as something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. And there I was, Elena Rodriguez, the orphan, the scholarship kid. The woman who clawed her way up from nothing, married to their golden boy for 5 years, and still, I was the outsider. The table groaned under the weight of perfection, crystal glasses catching firelight, china so expensive you could probably buy a car with one plate, turkey that cost more than my first month's rent in college. I'd spent 4 hours in that kitchen, chopping vegetables while the actual staff gave me sympathetic looks. 4 hours playing the dutiful daughter-in-law while my mother-in-law, Evelyn, sipped champagne and critiqued my knife skills. "You're so good at this, Elena," she'd cooed, my name dripping from her lips like poison honey. When dinner was ready, I tried to just sit, at the table. With my husband, with his family. Such a simple thing, right? Something any wife should be able to do without thinking. Evelyn's manicured hand shot out, blocking my chair. "Oh, darling," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for the judgment to land on every single person in that room. "Servants don't sit at the table." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the fire crackling, someone's fork scraping against china, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Richard, my father-in-law, smirked into his wine glass. "She's joking, but really, Elena, why don't you check on the pie?" Lydia, my sister-in-law, actually snickered, actually pulled out her phone and recorded me standing there, my face burning with shame. "Staff life," I heard her mutter, probably captioning it for her Instagram followers. And Mark, my husband, the man who promised his family would accept me? He froze. His mouth opened, then closed. "Mom, come on," he finally managed, weak, pathetic. But he didn't insist. He didn't stand up. He didn't choose me. I smiled, and that's what I remember most clearly about that moment. I smiled. Because standing there, humiliated in front of people who were supposed to be family, something inside me crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. They thought I was nothing, a gold digger at best, a servant at worst. But there was something they didn't know, something hidden in my purse at that very moment, a badge that could bring their entire world crashing down. Let me take you back, because to understand the fury, you need to understand the foundation it was built on. I was 12 when the fire took everything. My parents, our little house in Queens, every photograph, every memory, every shred of the life we'd built together. One faulty wire in the walls. That's all it took. I woke up in a hospital bed with second-degree burns on my arms and no family left in the world. The foster care system isn't kind to kids who come with trauma. I bounced between 7 homes in 6 years. Some families were nice enough. Others... Well, let's just say I learned early that cruelty often hides behind closed doors and polite smiles. I learned to be invisible, to observe, to notice the small details that revealed who people really were when no one was watching. That skill saved my life. I worked 3 jobs through high school, saved every penny, and earned a full scholarship to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. While other kids were partying, I was studying case files, learning about white-collar crime, understanding how the wealthy protected themselves through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. I graduated top of my class at 22. 6 months later, the FBI recruited me. "You have a unique quality, Miss Rodriguez," the recruiter said during my third interview. "You're invisible. People look right through you because you don't fit their narrative of what power looks like. That makes you dangerous." I became Special Agent Elena Rodriguez at 23. They placed me in the Financial Crimes Division, the unit that went after corrupt CEOs, embezzlers, money launderers, the rich criminals who thought wealth made them untouchable. For 9 years, I lived double lives. I infiltrated a drug cartel's money laundering operation by posing as a bank teller. I brought down a corrupt real estate mogul by working as his executive assistant. I helped dismantle a political corruption ring by pretending to be a campaign volunteer. 15 successful operations, 3 commendations, a reputation within the Bureau as someone who could disappear into any role. And then I met Mark Harrington at a coffee shop near Columbia, where I was taking graduate courses as part of my cover. He was getting his MBA, charming and earnest, with these warm brown eyes that seemed to actually see me. Not the agent, not the orphan, just me. We talked for 4 hours that first day. He listened, really listened, when I spoke about social justice and protecting the vulnerable. He shared his own frustrations with corporate greed, said he wanted to use business to make a positive impact. "My family's old school," he admitted during our third date. "But they'll love you. How could they not?" Oh, Mark, if only you'd known how that lie would echo through the years. 6 months of dating, a proposal on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. I said yes because I believed him. I believed that love could bridge the gap between my world and his. I believed that the Harringtons would see what he saw in me. I was so wrong. But here's what Mark didn't know, what I couldn't tell him because of classified protocols. My consulting work for nonprofits was a cover. Every business trip, every late night, every vague explanation. I was hunting people like his family, people who built empires on the backs of others while hiding behind respectability and philanthropy. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. If you're already feeling the tension building, make sure you're subscribed, because this is just the beginning of how far I was willing to go for justice. The wedding should have been my first warning. No, it was my first warning. I just didn't listen. Evelyn insisted I wear her wedding gown. To honor tradition, she said with that tight smile I'd come to recognize as barely concealed contempt. The dress was from 1985 with puffy sleeves and a waistline designed for someone 4 inches taller and 20 pounds lighter than me. I looked ridiculous. The alterations cost more than my entire education, and I still look like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. At the reception, Richard cornered me by the bar. 6'2", silver hair, the kind of commanding presence that made people instinctively step aside. He placed one heavy hand on my shoulder and leaned in close, his breath reeking of expensive scotch. "Welcome to the family, Elena," he said. "But remember, we built this empire over 3 generations. Don't drag us down trying to climb up." It wasn't a welcome. It was a threat. Mark overheard, laughed nervously. "Dad's just being dramatic. You know how he is." But Mark's eyes wouldn't meet mine. That should have told me everything. Year 1 was exclusion disguised as oversight. Family portraits for their holiday cards? "Oh, we thought you wouldn't want to be bothered." Sunday brunches at the country club? It's members and their children only, dear. Mark's grandmother's funeral? They literally forgot to tell me the time, and I showed up an hour late, walking into a church full of people who stared at me like I'd crashed a private party. "Sorry," Mark would whisper. "They're just getting used to you." But they never did. Year 2, Evelyn started helping with my attempts to fit in. I hosted a dinner party for Mark's colleagues, spent days planning the menu, setting the table, trying to prove I belonged. Evelyn arrived early, took one look at my braised short ribs, and literally pushed me aside. "Let me show you how it's done, dear," she said, grabbing the wooden spoon from my hand. She proceeded to oversalt everything, add unnecessary garnishes, and then present the meal as if she'd cooked it herself. "Elena did the prep work," she announced to the guests. "I just had to fix a few things." The guests laughed. Mark said nothing. I started noticing other things that year. Documents on Richard's desk when I used the bathroom during visits, wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, phone calls he'd take in his study, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, art shipments arriving at odd hours, wooden crates with customs forms that seemed incomplete, but I told myself it was none of my business. These were Mark's family. My family now, supposedly. I looked away. Year 3 brought Lydia's engagement to some hedge fund manager named Preston. The wedding was a spectacle. Ice sculptures, a live orchestra, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. I helped plan for 6 months, addressed invitations until my hand cramped. The rehearsal dinner was at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Manhattan. I showed up in the dress Evelyn had approved, only to find the entire wedding party already seated, at a table for exactly the number of people invited, not including me. "Oh," Lydia's eyes went wide with fake surprise. "Did we not tell you? It's just the wedding party tonight. You understand." I stood there in the restaurant entrance, designer dress suddenly feeling like a costume, while 20 people watched me realize I'd been deliberately excluded. Mark was already seated between his sister and his cousin. He saw me, made eye contact, then looked away and took a sip of his wine. I walked out, took a cab home, cried in the shower until the water ran cold. Mark came home at midnight, smelling of wine and cigars. "You're being oversensitive," he said. "It's just how they are." "How long?" I asked. "How long until I'm actually family?" He didn't answer. Just got into bed and turned off the light. Year 4 was when they stopped pretending. Richard hosted a business dinner at the estate. Potential investors, company executives, the kind of event where deals worth millions got made over brandy and cigars. Mark was being groomed to take over parts of the business. This was his chance to shine. Evelyn pulled me aside before guests arrived. "Elena, dear, would you help serve the drinks tonight?" Our usual girl called in sick. I stared at her. "You want me to serve? At my husband's business dinner?" "Well, you're so good at it," she said sweetly, "and it would really help Mark make the right impression." So I did it. I wore black like the staff. I carried trays of hors d'oeuvres. I refilled wine glasses while Mark networked with men who didn't even glance at my face. I was invisible again, but this time I'd been made invisible by choice, by my own family's choice. One of the investors, not knowing who I was, snapped his fingers at me. "You, more ice." I got him more ice. Mark saw it happen. Did nothing. Year 5, his promotion, executive vice president at 28, Richard's golden boy taking his rightful place in the empire. The celebration was massive. Champagne fountain, string quartet, 200 guests at the Metropolitan Club. I wore my best dress, had my hair professionally done. This was my husband's moment. I wanted to be proud, wanted to stand beside him as his partner. Evelyn intercepted me at the entrance. "Elena, darling, you look lovely." Then quieter, to Lydia standing beside her. "She's good for fetching things, at least. Mark could have done so much better, but I suppose she serves her purpose." They didn't know I was standing close enough to hear. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was the point. 5 years of small humiliations. 5 years of being made to feel less than. 5 years of watching the man I loved choose his family's approval over my dignity, over and over and over. And through it all, I kept noticing things. Suspicious transactions, whispered phone calls, art shipments with documentation that didn't quite match. The way Richard's business partners had the dead eyes of men who'd done unspeakable things for money. But I stayed quiet, stayed invisible, played the role they'd assigned me, until that Thanksgiving, when everything finally broke. The drive to the Hamptons that Thanksgiving morning was silent. Mark focused on the road, NPR playing softly. Snow just starting to dust the highway. I stared out the window, watching suburban sprawl give way to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. "They're making an effort this year," Mark said, breaking the silence. "Mom specifically said she wanted you to feel welcome." I didn't respond. What was there to say? We both knew what welcome meant in the Harrington vocabulary. The estate looked like something from a Gothic novel, all dark stone and tall windows, smoke curling from multiple chimneys, grounds so perfectly manicured they looked artificial under the light coating of snow. Mark's childhood home, a place I'd never, ever belong. Evelyn greeted us at the door in head-to-toe cream cashmere, diamonds at her throat and wrists. Darlings, air kisses that didn't quite connect. Mark, your father's in the study. Elena. The kitchen could use an extra pair of hands. It wasn't a request. I spent 4 hours in that kitchen. The actual staff, Maria and her daughter Carmen, were kind, giving me sympathetic looks as I chopped vegetables for the stuffing. Through the doorway, I could see the family in the great room. Champagne glasses, laughter, Mark's cousin telling some story that had everyone in stitches. No one came to get me. No one suggested I join them. Evelyn floated in once, refreshing her champagne. "You're doing wonderfully, dear," she said, surveying the massive island covered in prep work. "Such a help." The smell of roasting turkey filled the air. Normally, I love that smell. It reminds me of the Thanksgivings before the fire, when my mom would cook for days and our tiny apartment would smell like home. But that day, it made me nauseous. A mockery of family and tradition. Finally, dinner was ready. I helped Maria plate everything, each dish a work of art. The dining room was stunning. Long mahogany table that could seat 20, crystal chandelier casting rainbow fractals across white linens, china so delicate it was practically translucent. I washed my hands, smoothed my dress, and walked to the table. Found the place card with my name, positioned next to Mark. Pulled out the chair. That's when Evelyn's voice cut through the warm chatter like a blade. "Oh, darling, servants don't sit at the table." The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I stood there, one hand still on the chair back, frozen. Richard chuckled, swirling his wine. "She's joking, but really, Elena, why don't you check on the pie? Make sure it's ready for later." "I spent all afternoon making that pie," I said quietly. "It's ready." Nevertheless, Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The kitchen is where you're most comfortable, isn't it? Where you're most useful." Lydia pulled out her phone. I heard the soft ding of her camera app opening, saw her angle it toward me. "This is too perfect," she murmured. "Staff life." I looked at Mark, my husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect me. He was staring at his empty plate, jaw tight, color rising in his cheeks. "Mom, come on," he said finally, barely a whisper. "Let's not—" "She was just in there anyway," Richard interrupted. "And she does such a good job. Don't you, Elena? Better than most of the help we've hired over the years." Nervous laughter rippled around the table. Someone clinked their glass. The moment stretched, elastic and terrible, and that's when I felt it, that diamond-hard clarity. That moment when humiliation transforms into something else entirely, something cold and calculating and absolutely certain. I smiled, looked directly at Evelyn. "You're absolutely right," I said softly. "I should check on the pie." "Excuse me." I walked back to the kitchen on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, made it to the bathroom off the hallway, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was flushed. My hands were shaking. My wedding ring caught the light. The diamond Mark had saved for 6 months to buy, back when he was different, back when I believed in us. I twisted it off my finger, set it on the marble counter, stared at the pale band of skin it left behind. No more, I thought, no more playing small. No more invisible, no more servant. I pulled out my phone, opened the encrypted app that connected directly to my handler at the FBI. "Torres," I typed. "Need to activate." Target: Harrington family and associated business interests. Financial crimes, possible trafficking connections. Request full authorization to proceed with investigation. The response came in 30 seconds. Stand by. Then, 2 minutes later, approved. "Be careful, Elena. Personal cases get messy." I looked at my reflection again, at the woman who'd spent 5 years swallowing humiliation, who'd turned invisible to survive, who'd ignored every red flag because she wanted to believe in love. That woman was gone. I picked up my wedding ring, put it back on, smiled at myself in the mirror. They wanted a servant? Fine. I'd serve them justice. Because there was something the Harringtons didn't know, something they'd never even suspected in 5 years of treating me like hired help. I wasn't just Elena Rodriguez, the orphan they looked down on. I was Special Agent Elena Rodriguez, Financial Crimes Division, FBI, 15 successful undercover operations, 3 commendations for exceptional service, a specialist in taking down exactly the kind of criminals who hid behind wealth and respectability. And for 2 years, I'd been casually documenting irregularities in Richard's business, not investigating officially, just noticing, the way I'd been trained to notice: offshore transfers, suspicious shipments, connections to known money launderers, files upon files sitting in my personal drive, waiting. My handler had always said, "The best cases come from living them." Elena, sometimes justice finds you while you're looking for something else. I'd been looking for family, for acceptance, for love. Instead, I'd found my next case, my biggest case, the one that would end with federal agents storming through these pristine doors and tearing the Harrington empire apart, brick by expensive brick. I opened the bathroom door, walked back toward the dining room where I could hear silverware clinking, conversation flowing, laughter at some joke I hadn't heard. I paused in the doorway, watched them eat the meal I'd helped prepare, watched Mark take a bite of stuffing without meeting my eyes, watched Evelyn hold court at the head of the table, queen of her domain. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy this moment, this perfect, sparkling moment of superiority, because in 4 months, I'm going to destroy everything you've built, legally, methodically, completely, and you'll never see it coming. I smiled as I headed to the kitchen to check on a pie that didn't need checking. After all, that's what servants do. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in 5 years. Mark had already left for work. He'd been avoiding me since the dinner, guilt written all over his face every time our eyes met. Good. Let him squirm. I made coffee in our spotless Brooklyn apartment, the morning light cutting through the windows in sharp angles. Everything looked the same. The framed photos on the walls, the designer furniture Mark's mother had helped us pick out, the life we'd built together, or rather the life I'd been allowed to occupy the edges of. But I wasn't the same. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure FBI portal, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the encrypted interface. Torres had already set up the case file: Harrington Financial Investigation, Agent Rodriguez Primary. The cursor blinked, waiting. I started typing everything I'd observed over 2 years of being invisible in their world: the offshore accounts, the suspicious art shipments, the whispered phone calls, the connections to shell companies I'd glimpsed on Richard's desk, every detail I'd filed away while playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. 2 hours later, I had a 12-page preliminary report. It wasn't enough for warrants yet, but it was a foundation. And foundations, those I knew how to build. Elena? Mark's voice on my phone, uncertain. You coming to Sunday dinner this week? Of course they were pretending nothing had happened. Of course. Wouldn't miss it, I said sweetly. I'll even bring dessert. Because if they only knew, every visit from now on was reconnaissance. Every smile was cover. Every moment of playing the submissive wife was me gathering evidence to destroy them. Sunday dinner, I arrived early as always. Let me help set up, I offered to Evelyn, who looked momentarily surprised before her usual mask of condescension slid into place. How thoughtful, dear. Richard was in his study. I could hear him through the heavy oak door, his voice sharp and commanding. The shipment from Belize needs to clear customs by Friday. I don't care what it takes. Make it happen. Belize. My mind immediately cataloged the significance. Belize had minimal export regulations. was known for money laundering, had direct shipping routes to the U.S. through ports Richard's company controlled. I accidentally needed the bathroom, the one right next to Richard's study. The door was slightly ajar, and as I passed, I saw his desk. Covered in documents, his calendar open, shipping manifests visible. My phone was already in my hand. Click, click, click. 3 photos taken in the space of a heartbeat, while I hummed softly like I was just a wife wandering the halls of her in-laws' home. In the bathroom, I examined the photos, shipping dates, company names I didn't recognize, numbers that were clearly coded references to something. Back home that night, I ran the company names through our FBI databases. Ping, ping, ping. Harrington Imports wasn't just one company. It was 12 shell companies across 8 countries, all feeding into a central network designed to obscure the origin and destination of goods and money. The Caymans, Switzerland, Panama, Belize, Singapore, each one a layer of protection, each one a red flag. I called Torres from my secure line. "I need full authorization," I said. "This is bigger than I thought." "How big?" "International money laundering, possible smuggling operation, connections to at least 3 entities on our watch list." "And Torres?" I paused. "I'm already inside. They trust me because they think I'm nobody." Silence on the line. Then, "You're sure about this? Personal cases get messy, Elena, especially when it's family." "They're not my family," I said quietly. "They made that very clear." "Approved. I'm assigning you a team. But Elena, stay clean. By the book. No shortcuts. No matter how satisfying they might feel." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. "Justice tastes better when it's legal." Small victory. Chapter 1. Official investigation approved. Resources allocated. The machinery of federal law enforcement was now aimed directly at the Harrington Empire, and they had no idea. "If you only knew, Evelyn," I thought as I fell asleep that night. "If you only knew what you set in motion when you told me servants don't sit at the table." I met Sarah for coffee at a cafe in Greenwich Village, far from anywhere the Harringtons might venture. She slid into the booth across from me, her red hair pulled back in a severe bun, glasses perched on her nose, looking every inch the forensic accountant she was. "So," she said, stirring her latte, "you finally ready to admit your in-laws are criminals?" Sarah and I had been friends since college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and a shared belief that white-collar criminals were just as dangerous as any street thug. They just had better lawyers. She'd suspected the Harringtons from the beginning, made little comments over the years that I'd deflected. Not anymore. "I need your help," I said, officially. Her eyes widened. "The FBI is investigating them?" "I'm investigating them. I need someone who can follow money trails that have been deliberately obscured, someone who understands offshore accounts and shell companies and how the wealthy hide their crimes behind philanthropy and respectability." Sarah leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Finally. God, Elena, I've been waiting for you to wake up for years. Tell me everything." I showed her the photos from Richard's study, the preliminary database hits, the structure of the shell companies. She whistled low. "This is sophisticated," she said, her fingers already flying across her tablet, pulling up financial databases. 12 entities across 8 jurisdictions, all with just enough legitimate activity to avoid immediate red flags. But see here? She turned the screen toward me. The timing of transfers. Money moves from the U.S. to Belize, sits for exactly 3 days, then moves to Panama, then to Switzerland. That's classic layering, the middle stage of money laundering. Can you prove it? Give me access to the right records, and I can prove anything. Her smile was sharp. Greed always leaves a paper trail, Elena. Always. These people think they're untouchable, so they get sloppy. We just need patience. Patience? Right. Something I'd learned from 5 years of swallowing humiliation. I'll get you access, I promised, through official channels, everything by the book. And unofficially? She raised an eyebrow. How do you really feel about this? I thought about Evelyn's voice. Servants don't sit at the table. About Richard's smirk. About Lydia's phone camera documenting my humiliation for social media. About Mark's silence. I'm going to dismantle everything they've built, I said quietly. Legally, methodically, and completely. They wanted a servant? They're getting one. One who's about to serve them a federal indictment. Sarah raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. Now that's the Elena I remember from college, the one who took down that professor embezzling scholarship funds. He's in prison, I said. And the Harringtons will be too. She grinned. When do we start? The next piece was trickier. I needed someone inside, someone with direct access to Richard's real operations, someone who had reason to help. Carla Davis had been Richard's executive assistant for 8 years. I'd watched her over the years, efficient, overlooked, working 60-hour weeks while Richard barked orders and Evelyn treated her like furniture. She was in her 40s, professional, and I'd seen the flash of resentment in her eyes more than once when the Harringtons were particularly cruel. I approached her outside the Harrington Imports offices in Midtown. Carla, I'm Elena, Mark's wife. Could we talk? She looked nervous, glancing at the building entrance. Mrs. Harrington, I don't think— Not here, I said quickly, and it's not about you, it's about them. Please, just coffee. 20 minutes later, we sat in a Starbucks 3 blocks away. Carla clutched her coffee like a lifeline. I could lose my job just talking to you, she said. They treat everyone like servants, don't they? I said softly. Not just you, not just me, everyone who doesn't have the Harrington name. Her eyes met mine. You noticed. How could I not? 8 years is a long time to be invisible to people you work for. She laughed bitterly. Try being blamed for their mistakes. Try being told you're lucky to work for a family like ours. Try watching them commit. She stopped, eyes widening. Commit what, Carla? She shook her head. I can't. You don't understand. Richard has connections. He's made people disappear before, people who ask too many questions. I'm not asking questions, I said. I'm offering protection, federal protection. Because Carla, I'm not just Mark's wife. I'm FBI. And I'm investigating the Harrington family for financial crimes. If you have evidence, if you've been forced to participate in illegal activities, there's a way out. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she started crying. Not quiet tears. Great, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't want to, she whispered. He made me. Falsify documents, hide transfers, lie to auditors. He said if I didn't, he'd make sure I never worked again, that he'd destroy my reputation, my career, everything. I have a daughter in college. I couldn't risk it. I reached across the table, took her shaking hand. Then let's make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Help me and I'll help you. Immunity, witness protection if needed, everything. But I need the truth. All of it. Carla wiped her eyes, took a deep breath. I have copies, she said, of the real books, the ones Richard keeps separate from what gets filed with the government. 10 years of transactions he thinks no one can trace. Small victory number 2, the real books. Evidence that had been hidden for a decade, now in my hands because the Harringtons had treated one too many people as disposable. They treat everyone like servants, not just you, Carla said as we parted. Maybe it's time the servants fought back. Oh, Carla, you have no idea. Anonymous tips are an art form. Too vague, they get ignored. Too specific, they reveal the source. The key is providing just enough information to trigger an investigation without showing your hand. I crafted the tip carefully, feeding it through an encrypted portal the IRS maintains for whistleblowers. Evelyn's charity, the Harrington Foundation for Arts and Education, had been raising millions for years, hosting galas where Manhattan's elite sipped champagne and congratulated themselves on their philanthropy. But according to Carla's documents, a significant portion of those donations looped back to Harrington family accounts through a complex series of transactions. Embezzlement dressed up in designer gowns and tax deductions. The anonymous tip focused on discrepancies in the foundation's public filings versus actual expenditures. Nothing about how I knew, just enough detail to make an auditor curious. 3 days later, I was having lunch with Mark when his phone rang. His face went pale as he listened. "I'll tell her," he said, hanging up. "That was Mom. The foundation is being audited by the IRS. She's freaking out." "Oh no," I said, my face arranging itself into perfect wifely concern. "That's awful. Why would they audit a charity?" "Someone filed a complaint, anonymous. Mom thinks it's one of her society rivals, jealous of the foundation's success." I reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "I'm sure it's just routine. She hasn't done anything wrong, right?" Mark's eyes slid away from mine. "Of course not. It's just stressful." Inside, I was glowing, because Mark's hesitation told me everything. He knew, maybe not details, but he knew his family's money wasn't clean. The audit had immediate effects. The Harringtons were forced to cancel their annual European vacation, 2 weeks in the south of France, because Evelyn needed to be available for meetings with auditors and lawyers. The gala scheduled for February was postponed indefinitely. Small victory number 3, a multi-millionaire's vacation canceled. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. "This is someone targeting us," Evelyn hissed during Sunday dinner that week. Her usual polish was cracking, stress lines visible around her eyes. "Someone who wants to tear this family down." "Who would do that?" I asked innocently, passing the potatoes. "You've always been so generous to everyone." Her eyes narrowed, but she couldn't accuse me, not the devoted daughter-in-law who was always eager to help, always trying so hard to fit in. If she only knew I was the architect of her unraveling. Make sure you're subscribed, because the revenge is just getting started, and it's about to get so much better. By the 4th week, paranoia had taken root in the Harrington household. Richard was snapping at staff, Evelyn was downing wine at lunch, and Lydia's Instagram posts had taken on a defensive tone. Lots of "wah, blessed," and "you haters, gonna hate." Sunday brunch was tense. Richard barely touched his eggs Benedict, his phone constantly buzzing with calls from lawyers and accountants. When I arrived with fresh pastries from a bakery in Brooklyn, he looked up sharply. "Elena, you're here early." "I wanted to help set up," I said with my brightest smile. "Family is important." "You've been around a lot lately." His eyes were cold, calculating. "More than usual. Mark said you were going through a stressful time. I wanted to support you." "Support?" He said the word like it tasted bad. "You hear anything unusual? Gossip in your circles about our business?" This was dangerous. Richard hadn't gotten rich by being stupid. He was searching for the leak, for the person who'd triggered the audit. I let my eyes widen with concern. "Gossip? No, should I have? Is something wrong?" "The audit," Evelyn interjected, her voice sharp. "Someone reported us. Someone who has access to private information." "That's terrible," I said. "Who would do something like that?" "That's what I'd like to know." Richard's gaze held mine for a long moment, testing, probing. I held it steady. Years of undercover work had taught me how to lie to people far more dangerous than Richard Harrington. "I'm just trying to be part of the family," I said softly. The irony was delicious. Those exact words loaded with meaning they couldn't possibly understand. Lydia appeared from the kitchen, phone in hand as always. "You know what's weird? Everything started falling apart right after Thanksgiving, after—" She stopped, looking at me. "After that dinner." The room went quiet. Mark froze mid-bite. "After what, exactly?" I asked, my voice calm. "Nothing," she muttered, but her eyes said everything. Suspicion, doubt. The beginning of realization that maybe, just maybe, the woman they'd treated like a servant had teeth. "You seem different lately, Elena," Lydia said, her influencer smile not quite reaching her eyes. More confident. "Maybe I'm just finally comfortable," I said. "After 5 years, you'd think I'd be allowed to feel at home here." The subtle dig landed. Evelyn's mouth tightened. Richard's jaw clenched. But they couldn't say anything. not without admitting how they'd treated me, not without exposing the cruelty they'd wrapped in polite condescension. As I left that day, I felt their eyes on my back, watching, wondering. Good. Let them wonder. Let the paranoia build. Let them lie awake at night trying to figure out who was dismantling their empire. They'd never suspect it was the woman they'd told didn't belong at their table. Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She'd pose as a potential donor. Her accounting firm was successful. She had the right credentials, moved in adjacent social circles. She'd infiltrate Evelyn's world the way I'd infiltrated the family, by being underestimated. The Harrington Foundation Gala in February had been postponed, but Evelyn was hosting a smaller fundraiser at the estate, an intimate affair for 50 of Manhattan's wealthiest, each expected to donate at least $50,000. Sarah Morrison, she introduced herself to Evelyn, champagne glass in hand, dressed in understated elegance. "I've heard such wonderful things about your foundation's work." Evelyn lit up the way she always did around new money. "How generous of you to attend. Are you interested in arts education?" "Very much so," Sarah said smoothly, "though I'd love to hear more about your other initiatives. I understand the foundation has diverse interests." I watched from across the room, playing my usual role, fetching coats, making sure catering was running smoothly, invisible as always. But I could hear every word through the wire Sarah was wearing, legally obtained through a court order that authorized surveillance of Evelyn's charitable activities. Lydia, already 3 glasses deep, latched on to Sarah within minutes. The influencer in her couldn't resist someone new, someone who might boost her profile. "You should follow me," Lydia gushed, phone already out. "I post a lot about the foundation's work. Well, not lately because of the whole audit thing, but usually. It's so unfair. We're doing amazing things, and someone's trying to ruin us." "Audit?" Sarah's concern was perfect. "That sounds serious." "It's nothing." Lydia waved her hand dismissively, diamonds flashing. "Just competitors being jealous. My father's business is incredibly successful, you know. We have connections everywhere. Import-export, real estate, even some government contracts through our partners." "Partners?" Sarah leaned in, interested. "I'm always looking for good investment opportunities." And there it was. Lydia, desperate to impress, started name-dropping. Companies, individuals. Connections to Richard's business that she absolutely should not have been discussing at a charity event. "My brother Mark is being groomed to take over," Lydia continued. "He's got insider knowledge of all our upcoming deals. That's how I know which stocks to invest in." She giggled. "Technically, we're not supposed to trade on that information, but everyone does it, right?" Sarah's recorder captured every word. SEC violations, insider trading, undisclosed conflicts of interest between the foundation and Harrington Imports. Lydia's influencer deals weren't just tacky. They were illegal, paid promotions for companies that had business relationships with her father's firm, none of which she disclosed to her followers. After the event, Sarah met me in a parking garage in Queens, handed over the recordings and her notes. "She's incredibly stupid," Sarah said. "Or incredibly arrogant. Maybe both." "Both," I confirmed. "She's never faced consequences, never had to be careful because Daddy's money always protected her." "Not anymore." Sarah's smile was grim. "I've got enough here for an SEC complaint. Anonymous, of course. But with Lydia's social media history and these recordings, they'll investigate." Small victory before. 2 weeks later, the SEC opened an investigation into securities violations by members of the Harrington family. It was a separate case from the IRS audit, a second front in the war I was waging. And Lydia's carefully curated influencer career, it started crumbling immediately. Her first sponsor drop came via email, a luxury skincare brand. In light of recent regulatory scrutiny, they began. Then a fashion label, then a jewelry company. Within a month, she'd lost 8 major sponsors, each one representing tens of thousands in income. I was there for Sunday dinner when she broke down crying at the table. Everything's falling apart, she wailed. All my deals, my sponsorships, they're all canceling. Someone's sabotaging me. Darling, it's just the market, Evelyn soothed, though her own face was drawn. These things are cyclical. It's not cyclical. Lydia turned on me, mascara running. Everything started falling apart when you got more involved with the family. First the audit, now this. What did you do? The table went silent. Mark's fork clattered onto his plate. Richard's eyes narrowed. Me? I kept my voice gentle, confused. Lydia, I'm just your brother's wife. I don't have any influence over your business deals. Maybe success built on lies was always going to crumble, I added softly. Maybe when you don't disclose your conflicts of interest, when you trade on insider information, eventually someone notices. The words hung in the air. Too specific, too accurate. Evelyn's face went white. How did you? I read, I said simply. Financial news. The SEC takes disclosure very seriously. Anyone would know that. But the seed was planted. They were starting to wonder, starting to suspect that maybe the invisible woman they'd dismissed for 5 years was more than she appeared. Torres called me into the FBI field office in Manhattan. We've got the warrants, he said, sliding folders across his desk. Federal judge approved surveillance based on the evidence you've gathered. Phones, offices, the estate, 30 days of monitoring. All legal? I needed to be sure. By the book. Probable cause for money laundering and fraud. You've built a solid case, Elena. The technical team installed the bugs over a weekend when the Harringtons were at their Connecticut lake house. Phone taps were activated remotely. Everything recorded, everything transcribed, everything admissible in court. The first week of transcripts was mostly mundane. Business calls, social arrangements, arguments between Mark and Richard about company strategy. But interspersed with the ordinary were moments of crystal clarity. Moments that revealed exactly who these people were. Transcript, Evelyn Harrington's cell phone. Day 3. Evelyn. Can't stand another Sunday with her moping around. Elena's like a pet we can't quite train. Lydia. I know. At least a dog is loyal. She's just weird lately, always asking questions, always hovering. Evelyn. Mark should divorce her, cut our losses. He could marry someone appropriate. Senator Morrison's daughter is single again. I read the transcript in my apartment. Mark at work, coffee going cold in my hand. 5 years. 5 years I'd tried to earn their acceptance. And this was how they spoke about me in private. The hurt was sharp, but it clarified something. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was personal. Transcript. Richard Harrington office phone. Day 5. Richard. The offshore transfers must stay buried. If anyone connects the Belize accounts to the Singapore holdings, we're exposed. Unknown male. What about the assistant? Carla knows too much. Richard. Carla's smart enough to keep her mouth shut. She knows what happened to the last person who asked too many questions. Unknown. Male. You mean Peterson? Richard. Peterson disappeared. Tragic accident. These things happen to people who don't understand loyalty. I forwarded the transcript to Torres immediately. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was witness intimidation, possibly worse. We need to find Peterson, Torres said. If Richard had him killed, then we're looking at murder charges on top of everything else. Small victory, Subra 5. Enough evidence for a RICO case, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, designed to take down organized crime. The Harrington family was about to be treated like the mob, but the transcripts weren't just evidence. They were a window into how deep the cruelty went. Transcript. Family dinner, day 12. Richard. Mark's promotion was a mistake. He's too soft. Getting married to that orphan proved it. No business sense. Mark. Dad, I love her. Richard. Love, please. You love what she represents. Your little rebellion against standards. But she's a liability. Always has been. Mark. Silence. Evelyn. Just be grateful she can't have children. Can you imagine? Diluting the bloodline with her genetics? I couldn't have children. A car accident when I was 19 had made sure of that. Mark knew. I'd told him early in our relationship, expecting it to be a deal breaker. He'd held me while I cried, told me it didn't matter, that we'd find other ways to build a family, but to his parents it was just another flaw. Another reason I wasn't good enough. I didn't cry reading that transcript. I'd moved past tears. This was clarity. This was confirmation that the people I'd tried to please for 5 years were incapable of seeing me as human. Timmy came into my life almost by accident. Mark's older brother, James, had died in a sailing accident when Timmy was 2. His mother, struggling with addiction, lost custody a year later. The Harringtons took him in because it looked good, family taking care of family, but they treated him like an obligation. I started noticing him during Sunday dinners. 8 years old, quiet, always reading in a corner while the adults talked. Evelyn would snap at him for minor infractions. Richard ignored him completely. Lydia treated him like furniture. One Sunday, I found him crying in the library, a first edition Hemingway clutched in his small hands. "Hey," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "What's wrong?" "Grandmother said I'm a burden," he whispered, "that I should be grateful they let me live here." My heart cracked. This child, this innocent child who'd lost both parents, being made to feel like he was an inconvenience. "Listen to me, Timmy." I took his hands. "You are not a burden. You are a person who deserves love and kindness and a place at every table. Don't let anyone tell you different." He looked at me with those huge brown eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so, and I'm going to make sure you're protected, no matter what happens with the rest of this family." From that day, I visited more. Took Timmy to museums, to the park, to places where he could be a kid instead of a reminder of the Harringtons' failures. I taught him his worth, helped with homework, listened when he talked about his father, keeping those memories alive. "Why are you nice to me?" he asked once. "Everyone else just pretends I'm not there." "Because being invisible doesn't mean you don't matter," I said. "I was invisible too. I know what it feels like." Timmy became my moral anchor. Every time I felt the fury building, every time I wanted to hurt them the way they'd hurt me, I'd remember his face. This is why I was doing this, not just for revenge, but to protect the powerless from the powerful. To make sure that when the Harrington Empire fell, there was someone there to catch the innocent. I started documenting their treatment of him, recorded Evelyn calling him dead weight, photographed the barely furnished room they'd given him while guest rooms sat empty and perfect, built a case for custody that had nothing to do with federal crimes and everything to do with emotional abuse. When this ends, I thought, watching him laugh at a joke I'd told, when the FBI comes for them, I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere you'll be loved for who you are, not resented for who you're not. The undercover operation required careful planning. I couldn't pose as the buyer directly, too risky, too connected to Mark. Instead, we created a proxy, Marcus Chen, a wealthy art collector with dubious ethics and deep pockets. Actually, Marcus was Agent David Wu from our art crimes unit, fluent in Mandarin, with a background in antiquities that made him perfect for the role. Sarah had traced some of Richard's imports to galleries specializing in ancient artifacts, but the provenance was murky. Objects from Iraq, Syria, Yemen, countries torn by conflict, where priceless historical treasures were being looted and sold to fund wars and worse. Marcus reached out through an intermediary, expressing interest in exclusive acquisitions, the kind that didn't come with annoying paperwork or ethical considerations. Richard bit immediately. The meet was set at a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Our team had it wired 6 ways from Sunday. Audio, video, infrared, everything. Torres and I watched from a surveillance van 2 blocks away. Richard arrived in his Mercedes, dressed casually expensive. Marcus played his role perfectly, arrogant new money looking to burnish his collection with items his rivals couldn't get. "I understand you have access to certain exclusive pieces," Marcus said, his accent flawless. "Mesopotamian, perhaps." My contacts in Beijing mentioned you could procure items from difficult regions. I have sources, Richard said carefully. What specifically interests you? Antiquities, pre-Islamic era preferred, provenance less important than authenticity and discretion. Richard smiled, the predatory smile I'd seen 100 times at family dinners. I can arrange that. Though items from conflict zones are particularly valuable right now, unstable governments, minimal oversight, opportunities for the discerning collector. And the source? I like to know my supply chain. Let's just say certain organizations in the region are very interested in converting cultural heritage into operational funds. I help facilitate that conversion. Everyone wins. Except the people whose history was being stolen, I thought, watching the video feed. Except the victims of the groups you're funding. You're saying you work with terrorist organizations? Marcus pressed, playing dumb rich guy perfectly. I'm saying I work with entities that need liquidity and have assets to liquidate. What they do with the money isn't my concern. Richard shrugged. The beauty of art is that it transcends borders and laws. It's just objects, after all. Just objects. Human history, reduced to inventory. The meeting continued. Richard quoted prices that would make most people's eyes water, discussed shipping routes through ports where customs is manageable, mentioned names that pinged on federal watch lists, and we recorded every word. Small victory number 6, Federal Trafficking Task Force joined the investigation. This wasn't just about money anymore. Richard's greed had connected him to networks trafficking not just art, but potentially people, weapons, anything that moved through the same corrupt channels. Torres looked at me as we reviewed the footage. You okay? I know this is personal. I'm great, I said, and I meant it, because Richard's arrogance had finally caught up with him. His belief that wealth made him untouchable had made him careless. He'd literally confessed to federal agents while thinking he was impressing a potential client. Amateur. Carla had been feeding me documents for weeks, but she was terrified. Every meeting she looked over her shoulder. Every call, she whispered. The fear of Richard was visceral, real. He knows, she said during our last face-to-face meeting at a diner in New Jersey. Not about you, but he knows someone's leaking. He's watching everyone. Then it's time, I said. Time to get you out and get everything you know on record. We arranged it through official channels. Full immunity in exchange for testimony. Witness protection if needed. FBI safe house until the arrests. Carla sat across from me and Torres in an interview room, hands shaking as she opened her laptop. I have everything, she said. Forged customs documents going back 10 years, bribery payments to port officials, financial records showing systematic evasion of import duties, everything Richard made me falsify. Why? Torres asked gently. Why did you keep copies? Insurance, she admitted. I knew if he ever decided I was a liability, I'd need proof that I was coerced, that I wasn't doing this willingly. Tell us about Peterson, I said. The man Richard mentioned on the phone. Carla's face went pale. Thomas Peterson. He was a compliance officer at one of Richard's subsidiaries. 3 years ago, he found discrepancies in the import documentation. Started asking questions. Richard offered him money to stay quiet. Peterson refused. Said he had a duty to report it. And he disappeared. His car was found at the bottom of a ravine upstate. Police ruled it an accident, faulty brakes, bad weather. But I saw Richard's calendar the day before, a meeting with someone listed only as the mechanic. My blood ran cold. You think Richard had him killed? I think Thomas Peterson threatened Richard's empire, and then Thomas Peterson died in a very convenient accident. Draw your own conclusions. Torres immediately flagged the case for the Major Crimes Unit. If they could connect Richard to Peterson's death, this became a murder investigation. They told me to falsify documents or they'd destroy my career, Carla said, tears streaming. But it was worse than that. They made me complicit in smuggling, money laundering, maybe even murder. I just wanted a job. I just wanted to support my daughter. Servants have power when they decide to speak, I said softly. You're speaking now, and your testimony is going to bring down everyone who thought you were powerless. Carla went into protective custody that night. Richard would notice her absence, would panic, but by then it wouldn't matter. The walls were closing in. I'd been avoiding this truth for weeks, hoping somehow that Mark was innocent, that he'd been as deceived as I was. That the man I'd married still existed somewhere under the Harrington influence. But documents don't lie. Going through Carla's files, I found them. Shipping manifests signed by Mark. Financial transfers authorized by Mark. Emails where Mark discussed managing the offshore situation and keeping the Belize accounts clean. He knew, maybe not everything. Maybe he didn't know about Peterson, about the trafficking connections, about the full depth of his family's crimes, but he knew enough. He'd signed documents he knew were fraudulent. He'd helped hide money he knew was dirty, and he'd said nothing. To me, to authorities, to anyone. I confronted him on a Wednesday night after he came home from work, set my laptop on our kitchen table, the incriminating emails open. Want to explain these? He went pale. Elena. Where did you get? Where I got them doesn't matter. What matters is that your signature is on fraudulent customs documents. Your name is on accounts designed to hide taxable income. You've been part of this. It's just business. His voice was defensive, desperate. Everyone does it. These regulations are impossible to navigate without some flexibility. Everyone doesn't threaten whistleblowers, Mark. Everyone doesn't fund terrorism through antiquities smuggling. Everyone doesn't commit federal crimes and call it business. He stared at me. How do you know about? Then understanding dawned. You're investigating us. That's why the audits, the SEC investigation. You did this. I'm investigating criminals, I corrected. They happen to be your family. You're overreacting. He was getting angry now. The Harrington arrogance surfacing. This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? About Mom's comment? You're destroying my family because your feelings got hurt? The words hung between us like poison. My feelings, I repeated slowly. Mark, they called me a servant. For 5 years, they treated me like I was less than human, and you let them, every time. You chose their approval over my dignity. They're my family, and I was your wife. I was supposed to be your family, too. My voice cracked. But you never stood up for me, not once, not when it mattered. He ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to do? Turn on my own parents? I want you to choose right over wrong. But you can't, can you? Because you've known all along that what they do is wrong. And you've chosen to profit from it anyway. You're going to destroy everything. His voice was quiet now, defeated. No, I said. They destroyed everything. I'm just making sure there are consequences. That night, Mark slept on the couch. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, mourning a marriage that had been dead long before I'd admitted it. The man I'd loved, or thought I loved, had been a fiction, a story I'd told myself about who he could be, rather than who he actually was. He was his family, had always been. Would always choose them, choose wealth and status, and the comfort of not having to examine his own ethics. I drafted divorce papers the next morning. Christmas Eve at the Harrington estate was tense from the moment I arrived. The audit was still ongoing. The SEC investigation had frozen some of Lydia's accounts. Richard's business was hemorrhaging contracts as rumors spread about federal scrutiny. And I walked in smiling, carrying a homemade pie, playing the devoted family member. The cognitive dissonance was delicious. Evelyn's greeting was cold. Elena, how festive of you to come. Wouldn't miss family Christmas, I said brightly. Mark said you needed all the support you could get during this difficult time. Her eyes narrowed. Yes, these unfounded allegations have been very stressful. Unfounded? I tilted my head. But surely if everything was legitimate, the investigations would clear you quickly. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Richard appeared from his study, bourbon already in hand despite it being barely noon. "Must you be here? This is family time." "I am family," I said calmly. "Legally, anyway." "For now." Mark flinched. Lydia's head snapped up from her phone. "What's that supposed to mean?" Evelyn demanded. I smiled. "It means marriages require mutual respect to survive. It means servants eventually stop serving. It means a lot of things, Evelyn." The formality, using her first name instead of Mom, was deliberate. A line crossed. Richard took a step toward me. "You need to watch your tone." "Or what?" I met his eyes steadily. "You'll make me disappear like Thomas Peterson?" The room went dead silent. Richard's face turned red, then white. Evelyn gasped. "Who told you that name?" Richard's voice was dangerous. "Does it matter? What matters is that I know. I know a lot of things. About Belize, about the offshore accounts, about customs fraud and smuggling and all the ways you've built this empire on crime." Mark grabbed my arm. "Elena, stop." "When, then?" I turned to him. "When is the right time to tell the truth? When is it okay to stop pretending that this family's wealth is anything but stolen?" Lydia started crying. "You're crazy. You're trying to destroy us because you're jealous." "Jealous?" I laughed. "Of what? Your federal investigations, your crumbling reputation, the fact that everything you have is about to be seized by the government?" "Get out," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "Get out of this house." "Gladly." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Evelyn? Your cooking really is pedestrian. I've been polite about it for 5 years, but that Christmas goose you're so proud of? It's always dry. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea." I drove home in the snow, hands steady on the wheel, Christmas music playing softly on the radio. Behind me, the Harrington estate blazed with lights, a beautiful facade hiding the rot within. Soon, I thought. Soon the whole thing comes crashing down. The FBI has a media liaison office, people whose job it is to manage the press when major cases go public. I spent 2 days with them, crafting the narrative. "Elite family-built empire on crime" would be the headline, but we needed more than headlines. We needed the public to understand the scope, to see the Harringtons not as victims of overzealous prosecution, but as criminals who'd hidden behind philanthropy and social status. Sarah helped compile the financial breakdowns in language normal people could understand. They stole approximately $47 million through customs fraud alone. That's money that should have gone to schools, infrastructure, services. Instead, it paid for yachts and vacation homes. We prepared packages for major outlets, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, even some local NYC stations. Everything sourced, everything verified, everything timed to drop the moment arrests were made. "This is going to be huge," the media liaison said. "Old money brought down by the woman they married their son to? It's like a movie." "It's justice," I corrected. "The movie is just a bonus." Small victory, there were 7. Major news outlets on standby, ready to tell the story the moment I gave the signal. But I had one more move to make first. I called Mark on a Tuesday afternoon. His voice was wary when he answered. "Elena." "I want to try to fix things," I said, injecting my voice with false hope. "I was angry at Christmas. I said things I regret. Maybe we could all sit down, talk, try to heal these rifts." Silence. Then, "You're serious?" "I miss you," I lied. "I miss feeling like part of a family. Maybe if we could just talk, really talk, we could work through this." He wanted to believe it. I could hear the hope in his voice when he said he'd talk to his parents. "Evelyn called me that evening. Mark says you want to reconcile." "I want us to be a family," I said. "Real family. No more tension, no more investigations." I let my voice break convincingly. "I just want to belong." She was silent for a long moment. Then, "We could do Sunday dinner. This week, a fresh start." "I'd like that," I said. "Thank you, Evelyn." After we hung up, I called Torres. "It's set, Sunday, the estate. They think I'm surrendering. And they're actually going to show up thinking you've given in. They can't imagine I'd be capable of anything else," I said. "In their minds, I'm just the orphan who got lucky. I should be grateful for any scraps of acceptance they throw me. The idea that I've been orchestrating their destruction for 4 months? Inconceivable." Torres chuckled darkly. "Pride goeth before the fall." And they have so far to fall. The Harringtons group chat, which I still had access to through Mark's phone, was telling. Evelyn. She's finally accepting her place. I knew she'd come around. Richard. Good. She was becoming difficult. Lydia. Do we have to pretend to like her? Richard. For Mark's sake, and she might be useful if these investigations persist. Having the devoted wife on our side looks better. They thought they'd won, thought I'd broken, thought the servant had learned her lesson and was crawling back for forgiveness. They think I'm giving up, I told Torres. They have no idea I'm setting the table for their last supper. Sunday arrived cold and clear. I drove to the Hamptons early, as requested. To help prepare, Evelyn had said. Back to my old role. Perfect. The estate was quiet when I arrived. Staff preparing in the kitchen. I found Evelyn in the dining room, directing the table setting. Elena. She air-kissed near my cheek. So glad you've come to your senses. I've learned so much about family from you, I said, the irony dripping from every word. But she heard only the surface meaning. We've been patient with you, she said, but family requires certain standards. Oh, I understand standards now. Completely. Richard was in his study as always. I knocked, entered without waiting for permission. Richard, just wanted to thank you for giving me another chance. He looked up from his papers, surprised. Well, good. Business has been stressful lately, these baseless investigations, but they'll pass. Business must be very stressful with all the scrutiny, I said innocently. All those questions about customs forms and offshore accounts. His eyes hardened. We're being targeted by competitors, nothing more. Of course. I smiled. I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. I found Lydia in her room, filming a video about staying positive during difficult times. Hey, I said from the doorway. She jumped. God, Elena, not much. Sorry, just wanted to say I hope we can move past our issues. All the bad luck you've been having. It's not bad luck. She glared at me. Someone's been sabotaging me. Bad luck happens to bad people sometimes, I said softly. Karma, you know. Her face flushed red. Are you threatening me? I'm just making conversation. Isn't that what family does? Each interaction was a knife twist. Each smile a reminder that they had no idea what was coming. The dramatic irony was perfect. I knew everything. They knew nothing. Mark found me in the kitchen later. You're being weird. I'm being myself, I said. Finally. What does that mean? It means I'm done pretending, done playing small, done being invisible just because it makes you comfortable. His face creased with worry. Elena, what did you do? What did I do? I turned to face him fully. I did what you should have done 5 years ago. I chose right over wrong. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. You should have been scared all along of what your family really is, but you chose not to look. Before he could respond, I walked away. There was still dinner to prepare, still the final act to stage. The dining room looked perfect. Candles flickering, snow falling softly outside the tall windows, crystal and china gleaming. The Harrington estate at its most beautiful, dressed up for its own funeral. I'd prepared most of the food myself. Roasted chicken with herbs, root vegetables, fresh bread. Nothing extravagant. I wasn't trying to impress anymore. Just feeding them one last time before the hammer fell. In my purse, my FBI badge, my phone with Torres on speed dial, and a calm certainty that had taken 4 months to build. The family gathered at 6. Everyone dressed nicely, attempting normalcy. attempting to believe that this dinner would reset everything, that the troublesome daughter-in-law had been brought to heel. Torres's final call came at 5:47 p.m. Teams in position, warrant signed, ready on your signal. Stand by, I said. Let them eat first. You sure about this, Elena? I thought about 5 years of humiliation, about servants don't sit at the table, about Timmy crying because his grandmother called him a burden, about Thomas Peterson at the bottom of a ravine, about every person the Harringtons had crushed because they believed wealth made them untouchable. I'm sure, I said. They called me a servant. Time to serve justice. I hung up and walked to the dining room with the first course. Small victory, number 8, 4 months of investigation. 4 months of maintaining the moral high ground, of staying legal, of building an ironclad case. And now, the end game. I looked at the Harrington family, sitting at their table in their mansion, surrounded by their stolen wealth. And I smiled, because they had no idea that in exactly 23 minutes, their world would end. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. The first course was a winter salad. Arugula, roasted beets, goat cheese, candied walnuts. I'd made the dressing from scratch, a balsamic reduction that had taken an hour to perfect. Not because I cared about impressing them anymore, but because there was something poetic about serving them a beautiful meal before serving them federal indictments. Richard raised his wine glass as everyone sat. To family unity, he said. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Family unity, they echoed, glasses clinking. Elena, dear, you've outdone yourself with the table settings, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with condescension even as she tried to sound appreciative. So creative, like I was a child who'd finger painted. Thank you, Evelyn. I tried to make everything perfect for tonight. Lydia was on her phone as always, scrolling through what remained of her social media engagement. Mark was tense beside me, his body language screaming discomfort. He knew something was wrong, could feel it in the air. Good instincts. Too bad he'd never used them to question his family's business practices. The conversation flowed around me. Business talk, social gossip, complaints about the ongoing investigations presented as if they were minor inconveniences rather than existential threats. The auditors are being completely unreasonable, Evelyn complained, asking for documentation from years ago as if we keep every receipt. You should keep every receipt, I said mildly. It's basic accounting. Richard shot me a look. We have accountants for that. Of course. I'm sure they're very thorough. I took a sip of wine to hide my smile. Snow continued to fall outside, beautiful and pristine. The estate looked like something from a Christmas card. Picture-perfect American wealth. I checked my watch. 18 minutes. I brought out the roasted chicken, vegetables glazed to perfection, fresh bread still warm from the oven. Set each plate carefully, the dutiful hostess one final time. As we ate, Richard's phone rang. He frowned at the screen, stepped away to answer. What do you mean the press is calling? His voice carried from the hallway. What irregularities? No comment. No, stop calling this number. He returned to the table, his face tight. Reporters, asking about our business practices. Again? Evelyn's fork paused halfway to her mouth. This is harassment. Maybe it's not harassment, I suggested quietly. Maybe someone finally decided to ask the right questions. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean by that? Richard's voice was dangerous. I mean that journalists investigate. It's their job. When they see patterns, audits, SEC investigations, suspicious business practices, they ask questions. It's how accountability works. Accountability? Lydia scoffed. You sound like some social justice warrior. I sound like someone who believes in the rule of law. Mark's hand found mine under the table, squeezed. A warning or a plea, I couldn't tell. More phones started buzzing. Evelyn checked hers, her face going pale. There are news alerts about us, about the company. Richard grabbed his phone, scrolling frantically. How did they This information is supposed to be confidential. Because I leaked it, I thought. 2 hours ago, coordinated with Torres, the media packages going live as we sat down to dinner. What do they say? Lydia demanded, her influencer instincts recognizing a PR crisis. That we're under federal investigation for money laundering, Evelyn whispered. For fraud, for... Richard, this can't be happening. It's lies, Richard growled. Competitors spreading lies. I'll sue every outlet that... You'll need to prove it's false to win a defamation suit, I interrupted. Truth is an absolute defense. They all stared at me. How do you know that? Mark asked quietly. I met his eyes. I know a lot of things. Elena serving the main course, I continued placing plates with steady hands, each portion perfectly plated, each dish a metaphor for the meal I was really serving. Justice, cold and measured. The dramatic irony was exquisite. I knew the FBI was 12 minutes away, knew warrants were signed, knew their phones would soon be evidence, knew their empire was already rubble. They just hadn't realized it yet. The press is wrong, Richard said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. We'll issue a statement. Will you? I asked. What will it say? That the investigations are baseless? That your business practices are completely legitimate? That there's no truth to any of it? Yes, he glared at me. Exactly that. I nodded slowly. Okay, but statements should probably be reviewed by lawyers first, and your lawyers are going to be very busy very soon. Stop talking in riddles, Evelyn snapped. If you have something to say, say it. Not yet, I said softly. Dessert first. The news alerts were cascading now. Major outlets all going live simultaneously with stories about the Harrington family's alleged crimes. Financial networks, print media, cable news. The story I'd helped craft, now public. Richard was on his phone, calling lawyers who weren't answering because it was Sunday evening and their fees didn't cover crisis management for unfolding federal cases. Evelyn was crying, her perfect makeup streaking. Lydia was spiraling on social media, watching her remaining followers flee in real time. Who did this? Richard roared, slamming his phone on the table. Who leaked confidential investigation details to the press? Anonymous sources, I said, standing to clear plates. That's what the articles say. Anonymous sources with direct knowledge of the investigations. You. Lydia pointed at me with a shaking finger. You did this. You've been behind everything. Have I? I smiled. I'm just the servant, remember? The woman who doesn't even deserve a seat at this table. How could I possibly orchestrate something so complex? Elena, Mark started. Get us wine, Evelyn interrupted, desperate to regain some semblance of control. Quickly, we need to think clearly. The demand hung in the air, the same tone she'd used for 5 years. The same assumption that I existed to serve. I looked at her, at Richard, at Lydia, at Mark, and I said the words I'd been waiting 4 months to say. Get it yourself. The room froze. What did you say? Richard stood, his face purple with rage. I said, get it yourself. I straightened, meeting his eyes without flinching. I'm not your servant. You ungrateful, Evelyn started. Ungrateful? I laughed. For what? For 5 years of humiliation? For being excluded and demeaned and treated like hired help? Oh yes, I'm so grateful. Elena, please, not now, Mark begged. Let's just... When then? I turned on him. When is the right time to have dignity? When is it okay to stop accepting abuse from people who should have loved me? We took you in, Richard snarled. Gave you a place in this family despite your background. My background? My voice was ice. You mean being orphaned? Working my way through college? Building a life from nothing? That background? Yes. Evelyn's mask had completely shattered. You were nothing when Mark found you. We elevated you, gave you access to our world. And this is how you repay us? By destroying... You ungrateful... Lydia started toward me. Knock, 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 heavy, authoritative, unmistakable, the kind of knock that changes everything. The room went silent. All eyes turned toward the front entrance. Knock, 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 louder, more insistent. Richard moved toward the door, but before he could reach it, crash. The door burst open. FBI, search warrant! And suddenly the dining room was flooded with federal agents, badges out, voices barking orders. The careful choreography of a raid months in the planning. Chaos. Beautiful, legal, absolutely justified chaos. I stayed exactly where I was, standing at the table, my hand moving to my purse. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward. The moment when everything changed, and I was ready to serve them their final course. Crash. The front door of Harrington Estate burst open like something from an action movie, except this was real. This was federal agents executing a warrant. This was justice with badges and tactical gear and the full weight of the United States government behind it. FBI, search warrant, everyone stay where you are. Agents flooded the dining room, 10, 15, 20 of them. Navy windbreakers with bright yellow letters, boots thundering on the marble floors that Evelyn was so proud of. The Italian marble that cost more than most people's houses. Radios crackling with coordinated communications. Camera flashes as they began documenting everything. The sensory assault was overwhelming, the sharp commands of agents clearing rooms. The metallic smell of gun oil mixing with the roasted chicken, the squeak of tactical boots on polished floors, the red and blue lights from vehicles outside painting the snow-covered grounds in alternating colors. Professional, overwhelming, absolutely terrifying if you were guilty. Richard's face went from purple rage to ash gray in seconds. This is absurd. Do you know who I am? The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen everything, didn't even blink. Yes, sir. You're Richard Harrington, CEO of Harrington Imports. That's exactly why we're here. You're under arrest for violations of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, money laundering, customs fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. She nodded to two agents who moved forward with handcuffs. You can't. I have rights. I want my lawyer. Richard backed against the wall, all his commanding presence evaporating. You have the right to remain silent, the agent began, and the Miranda warning that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Evelyn was shrieking, literally shrieking like she'd been mortally wounded. This is a mistake. We're the Harringtons. We have connections. The mayor, the governor. They'll hear about this. Ma'am, Evelyn Harrington, you're also under arrest. Another agent approached her with handcuffs. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. I run a charity, Evelyn sobbed, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. I help children. I'm a philanthropist. You stole from children, ma'am. That's not philanthropy. That's theft. Lydia had collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her phone like it could save her. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Someone help. Anyone. But her phone was already being confiscated. Evidence. Every device, every document, every electronic footprint they'd left. Lydia Harrington, you're being detained for questioning regarding accessory to fraud and securities violations. I didn't do anything. I'm just an influencer. I post about fashion. You posted about fashion while committing insider trading, ma'am. Mark was frozen in his chair, staring at the chaos with the blank expression of someone whose entire reality was crumbling. An agent approached him, more gently than the others. Mark Harrington, we need to ask you some questions. You're not under arrest at this time, but you're required to cooperate with our investigation. I don't understand. His voice was small, lost. What's happening? I stood up from my chair slowly. Every agent in the room knew who I was. Torres had briefed them. But to the Harringtons, I was still just Elena, still just the servant who didn't belong at their table. Time to change that. The house was being systematically searched. Agents in every room, photographing, cataloging, seizing. I could hear them upstairs, in Richard's study, in Evelyn's private office. Years of hidden documents, encrypted hard drives, burner phones they thought were untraceable. All of it evidence now. "Secure the property," the lead agent commanded. "Separate the suspects for individual questioning. Process the scene by the book. I want every I dotted and every T crossed." By the book. Exactly how I'd done everything for 4 months. Richard was being led out in handcuffs, still sputtering about lawyers and rights and people he knew. Evelyn was fighting the handcuffs, leaving scratch marks on the agent trying to process her. Lydia was being held by 2 agents because she'd tried to run. Where? Nobody knew. As if you could outrun the FBI. The dining room that had been so perfect 30 minutes ago was now a crime scene. Evidence markers on the table. Agents photographing the china, the crystal, even the meal I'd prepared. And in the middle of it all, I stood calm, composed, ready for my reveal. I reached into my purse slowly, agents tensed, hands moving toward weapons until the lead agent held up her hand. "She's clear. She's one of ours." I pulled out my badge. The shield gleamed under the chandelier light. Federal Eagle, proud and unmistakable. "Special Agent Elena Rodriguez," I said clearly. "Financial Crimes Division. I'm the primary on this case." The silence that followed was profound. Then Mark's voice cracking. "What?" Gasps from Richard and Evelyn as they were being led toward the door. Lydia's sobs cut off mid-breath. Every Harrington family member and their guests frozen in disbelief. "That's impossible," Richard breathed. "You're nobody. You're just a servant?" I finished for him. "Yes, you've made that very clear. But I'm also a federal agent who's been investigating your criminal enterprise for 4 months. Every document you signed, every wire transfer, every bribe, every threat. I documented all of it." "You've been lying to me?" Mark stood up, his face a mask of betrayal. "Our entire marriage?" "I've been doing my job," I said, meeting his eyes. "I fell in love with a man I thought had integrity. I married him hoping his family would accept me. Neither of those things turned out to be true. But my job? That I've done perfectly. You married me under false pretenses." Mark's voice rose. "You've been spying on my family." "I married a man I loved," I corrected, my voice steady. "I investigated criminals who happened to be related to him. There's a significant difference. Your family's crimes existed long before I met you, Mark. I just finally decided to do something about them." "You can't do this," Evelyn shrieked from the doorway, fighting against the agents holding her. "You infiltrated our family. You tricked us." "I tricked you?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh. "Evelyn, I was transparent about everything except my job, which is classified for national security reasons. Everything else? I was honest. I tried to be part of your family. I tried to earn your respect. You chose to treat me like a servant. That was your choice." You servant, you were nothing." Evelyn's composure had completely shattered. The elegant society matron was gone, replaced by a woman whose mask had finally slipped to reveal the ugliness beneath. "And yet," I said softly, walking closer to her, "this nothing brought down everything you built on cruelty. This nothing had the power all along. You just never saw it, because you never looked." Richard was breathing hard, the handcuffs biting into his wrists. "Your career is over. No agency will trust you again. You'll be—" "Promoted, actually," I interrupted. "My handler already informed me. Senior Special Agent. This case will be taught at the FBI Academy as an example of patient, meticulous investigation. My career is just beginning, Richard. Yours is over." I turned to face all of them. Richard being held by 2 agents, Evelyn still fighting her handcuffs, Lydia collapsed and sobbing, Mark standing alone looking shattered. This was the moment when I finally got to tell them everything I'd held back for 5 years. "You want to know why I did this?" I asked, my voice carrying through the chaos. Let me tell you about each of your crimes, not just the federal charges, though those are extensive, but your crimes against basic human decency. I turned to Richard first. He was trying to maintain some dignity despite the handcuffs, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Richard, you called me a gold digger, implied I married Mark for money. But I make 6 figures investigating people like you. Your money never impressed me. Your crimes did. Every shipment I traced from conflict zones, every bribe you paid to port officials, every wire transfer to accounts designed to hide taxable income. And Thomas Peterson, the whistleblower you handled, we're reopening his case. His family will finally get justice, and you'll face murder charges on top of everything else. Richard's face went white. You can't prove? Your assistant kept detailed records, including your calendar entry with someone you listed as the mechanic the day before Peterson's brakes failed. We're very interested in talking to your mechanic, Richard. Next, Evelyn. She'd stopped fighting, was just staring at me with pure hatred. Evelyn, you said servants don't sit at the table. Those words changed everything, but not the way you intended, because servants see everything. We're in your houses, handling your private papers, overhearing your phone calls. I saw every forged donation receipt, every dollar you stole from the charity you claimed helped children, every conversation you thought was private because you assumed I was too stupid or too irrelevant to matter. Your elegance was just a mask for theft, and now everyone knows it. Tears were streaming down her face, but not from remorse. From humiliation, from the public fall. You're going to federal prison, Evelyn, and in prison, everyone sits at the same table. Lydia was next. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Lydia, you posted about hard work and success while living off stolen money. You promoted products from companies your father had business with and never disclosed the conflict. You traded stocks based on insider information from Mark. Your entire career was built on fraud. Your sponsors dropped you because I showed them the truth. You're not an influencer. You're an accessory to federal crimes. Your trust fund? Seized? Your lifestyle? Over? Your followers? They're watching you get arrested in real time. She sobbed harder, curling into herself. Finally, Mark. My husband. The man I'd loved, or thought I loved. Mark. My voice was quieter now, but no less cutting. You don't face criminal charges. The evidence of your knowledge is circumstantial, but we both know the truth, don't we? You knew something was wrong. I saw it in your eyes every time your father discussed business, every time your mother's charity numbers didn't add up, every time I found suspicious documents. You chose not to look. You chose comfort over conscience. You chose their approval over my dignity. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face. That's your crime, not a federal one, a moral one. You chose them over me every single time, and now you get to live with that choice. No inheritance, it's all being seized. No family business, it's being dissolved. No wife, divorce papers will be served tomorrow. You're not going to prison, Mark. You're going to have to live with knowing you enabled this. That's punishment enough. The room was silent except for Lydia's sobbing and the crackle of FBI radios. You all thought I was nothing, I said, my voice steady and strong. The orphan who got lucky, the girl who should be grateful for scraps, the servant who didn't deserve a seat at your table. But I was never nothing. I was invisible by choice, gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the right moment. And tonight I served you justice. How does it taste? No one answered. There was nothing they could say. The arrests were just the beginning. Over the next 72 hours, the full weight of the federal government came down on the Harrington empire. Richard Harrington, formally charged with RICO violations, money laundering through 12 shell companies across 8 jurisdictions, customs fraud totaling $47 million, smuggling of antiquities from conflict zones, wire fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy. The Peterson case was reopened. with the mechanic tracked down and offering testimony in exchange for immunity. Richard faced 25 to 30 years in federal prison. At 62, that was effectively a life sentence. All assets, the Hamptons estate, the Connecticut Lake House, the Manhattan penthouse, the art collection, the cars, the boats, seized under criminal forfeiture laws. Evelyn Harrington, charged with fraud, embezzlement of $8.3 million from the Harrington Foundation, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The charity was dissolved, all remaining assets redirected to legitimate organizations. Her personal fortune, separate from Richard's in theory, completely intertwined in practice, was frozen pending civil forfeiture. She faced 15 years. At 59, she'd likely die in prison or emerge an old woman with nothing. Lydia Harrington, accessory to fraud, securities violations including insider trading, tax evasion on undisclosed income. Her trust fund, which had held $4.2 million, was seized. She faced 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and financial penalties that would bankrupt her. No prison time due to cooperating. She'd turned on her parents almost immediately, hoping to save herself. It didn't save much. Her social media career was destroyed. Her friends abandoned her. Her engagement was called off. Mark Harrington. No criminal charges filed. The evidence of his direct knowledge was circumstantial. He'd been careful, or his parents had kept him at arm's length from the worst of it. But insufficient evidence for prosecution didn't mean innocent. It meant lucky. His inheritance, gone. His job at the family company, dissolved. His reputation, destroyed. The media dubbed him the complicit heir. Divorce papers were served 3 days after the arrests. He didn't contest them. The Harrington empire. Properties auctioned to pay restitution to victims. The company dissolved. Assets distributed to creditors and the government. Employees, the innocent ones like Carla, received severance and job placement assistance. The guilty ones faced their own charges. The media frenzy was spectacular. FBI agent infiltrates criminal family through marriage, ran as the headline on every major outlet. Think pieces about wealth and accountability. Social media exploded with reactions. The Harrington name became synonymous with white-collar crime and justice. Their social circle disappeared overnight. The same people who'd attended their galas and laughed at their jokes now claimed they'd always suspected something was wrong. Society has no loyalty to the fallen. Torres pulled me aside 3 days after the arrests, as I was finishing paperwork at the field office. Elena, hell of a case. He was smiling. Textbook investigation. Every procedure followed. Every warrant justified. Defense attorneys are scrambling because there's nothing to attack. You did it perfectly. I had good motivation, I said. Personal cases are risky. You kept it professional. That's impressive. He paused. You're being promoted, senior special agent, and this case, it's going to be taught at Quantico, how to conduct long-term undercover financial investigations, how to maintain cover while gathering evidence, how to stay ethical when you have personal stakes. The promotion felt good. The vindication felt better. But the best part? There's something else, Torres said. The kid, Timmy. Child Protective Services is removing him from Harrington custody. They need to place him. I want him, I said immediately. I've been documenting their treatment of him. I've built a relationship with him. I can provide a stable home. That's what I thought you'd say. Torres slid a folder across his desk. Your attorney should file for custody. With the parents in federal custody and your documented relationship with the child, you've got a strong case. 6 weeks later, Timmy moved into my apartment in Brooklyn, the one I'd shared with Mark, now emptied of his presence and filled instead with furniture appropriate for an 8-year-old. A desk for homework, bookshelves for his collection, a bed with a Spider-Man comforter he'd picked out himself. You saved me, he said the first night, helping me make dinner in our small kitchen. No, I corrected, kneeling down to his level. We saved each other. You reminded me why I do this job. Why justice matters. You kept me honest when I wanted revenge. You showed me what real family means. What does it mean? It means love without conditions, respect without having to earn it, a place at the table just because you exist, not because you've proven your worth. He hugged me tight. I like our table better than theirs anyway. Me too, kiddo, me too. Building a real family, one based on love instead of blood, on mutual respect instead of obligation, was harder than taking down a criminal empire. But it was better, so much better. Timmy thrived. His grades improved. He joined a soccer team. He laughed more, made friends. And every night, I read him bedtime stories, and he told me about his day, and we built something the Harringtons had never understood. Home. The day I testified at Richard's trial, Timmy was in the courtroom. I wanted him to see that truth matters, that speaking up matters, that servants, that people others dismiss, have power when they choose to use it. Aunt Elena was really brave, he told his school counselor later. She stood up to bad people even when they were scary. That testimony helped convict Richard. My patient documentation, my recorded evidence, my willingness to face him in court and detail every crime. Carla testified too, no longer afraid. Other employees came forward, emboldened by our example. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. I didn't smile when the verdict was read. This wasn't about happiness. It was about justice. Later, packing up Mark's remaining things from our apartment, photos from when we were happy, books he'd never read, the pretense of a life we'd built, I found our wedding photo. I looked so hopeful, so naive, so certain that love could bridge any gap. I tried to serve a family that saw me as a servant, I said quietly to my empty apartment, but I am nobody's servant. I put the photo in a box, sealed it, set it aside for the trash. I served justice, and justice served. You know what I learned through all of this? Family isn't about blood or money or lineage traced back to colonial tycoons. It's about respect, basic human respect. The Harringtons built their world on a foundation of looking down at others. They believed their wealth made them superior, their name gave them permission to diminish anyone they deemed lesser. But here's the truth they never understood. Every person they called a servant, every employee they threatened, every lesser person they stepped on, we're the foundation they built on. And foundations can crack. Foundations can crumble. Foundations can bring down the entire structure when they finally say enough. They saw me as nothing because I came from nothing, but coming from nothing taught me what actually matters: dignity, justice, protecting the vulnerable, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Timmy, one 8-year-old boy they treated as a burden, matters more than their entire estate ever did. If you've ever been made to feel less than, know this: hidden strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention or validation. It waits, it watches, it plans. And when the time is right, it acts with precision and purpose. The people who dismiss you as help often need the most help understanding that respect isn't inherited. It's earned through how you treat others. Power isn't about money or status. It's about integrity and justice. Justice isn't about destruction. It's about balance. The Harringtons built their empire by crushing others. That empire fell under its own rotten weight. I just documented the decay. I just held up a mirror and forced the world to see what they really were. Did they get what they deserved? Or should karma have struck harder? I think about that Thanksgiving dinner sometimes, the smell of turkey, the clink of crystal glasses, the false warmth hiding such deep cruelty. Evelyn's voice cutting through the chatter. Servants don't sit at the table. If she could see me now, raising Timmy in a home full of love, promoted in my career, respected by my colleagues, finally free of their toxicity, living a life built on truth instead of pretense, They're in federal prison, their empire in ruins, their name forever associated with crime and arrogance, reading about their own crimes in newspapers, eating at metal tables in prison cafeterias, and I'm reading Timmy bedtime stories, teaching him that his worth isn't determined by others' cruelty, showing him what real family means, who really won. If you agree that dignity matters more than dollars, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me which city you're from. Let's build a community of people who know their worth isn't determined by others' cruelty. Share this story with anyone who needs to hear that servants can topple kings. Family should lift you up, not tear you down. And if they won't, sometimes you have to serve them the truth. Because at the end of the day, we all sit at the same table. The only question is, do you use your seat to build others up or tear them down? I chose to build, and I'll keep choosing that every single day. Make sure you're subscribed for more stories about justice, karma, and people who refuse to stay silent. Because the world needs to know. The invisible ones, we're watching. We're waiting. And when the time comes, we act. And we never, ever forget who called us servants.